Have you ever felt like all the buyers on eBay are scammers and they're out to get only you? Well, you're probably not alone, but we're going to talk about that today on today's show. We're going to talk about scammers and what you can do to protect yourself against these dastardly villains of eBay. So, welcome to the Prof Sales YouTube channel. My name is Prof Sales, and on this channel, we talk about being an entrepreneur, selling on eBay, reselling, being in business for yourself, your mindset, being positive, and just a whole host of other things that have to do with business and entrepreneurship. And I want to say, first of all, this show is being sent out live right now. So there's a live chat room. You can join us every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time if you want to be part of the show. But if you have a question or comment, you can also leave that down below after the show post. And I know that some of you who are long-term listeners and watchers of this show are probably thinking, why in the world is Prof doing a show about eBay scammers? Because he has said many times before, most of the people that are on eBay that are buying from you are not scammers. A lot of times the things that you think are a scam, in fact, are not a scam, are in fact just kind of your perception of the situation, but it's not really the reality of the situation. And that is still true. So let me say before we get too far in this show that the vast, vast majority of eBay buyers are not scammers. They're not in any way, shape, or form. The vast majority of eBay transactions go through very, very smoothly. The vast majority of your eBay transactions, if you get up to a point where you have hundreds or even thousands of transactions, are going to be no problem. You're not going to have any sort of issue with the buyer. The buyer's not going to have any sort of issue with your product. And it's going to go swimmingly. You know, you're going to put the item out there to sell. They're going to give you their money. You're going to ship it to them. They're going to give you good feedback. You're going to give them good feedback. And that's going to be that. But while the vast majority of buyers are not scammers, the vast majority of resellers' time seems to get spent on scammers, at least some of us and sometimes. So I think it's important to probably address, kind of this topic. So I'm going to break it down for you, kind of my perception of everything. And I'm going to talk about 5 different scams that are out there. And a couple of them aren't really so much scams. They're just more situations, shall we say, that can come up. And I'm going to talk to you about how you can resolve them, and then how you can prevent from getting taken advantage of on eBay from that very, very tiny minority of buyers that are out there that will potentially take advantage of you if you let them. Okay, so let me talk about, first of all, the anatomy of a scam. This is kind of my perception, sort of a definition I came up with. So the anatomy of an eBay scam, in my view, is a situation where a buyer buys something from a seller, and then the buyer wants to gain an unfair advantage over that seller. Now, that unfair advantage could be monetarily, it could be in shipping, it could be to get you to ship the item faster or cheaper, it could be a discount off the item, it could be all kinds of things, but it all boils back down to the buyer wants an unfair advantage over a seller. And when I say the word unfair, I mean something that's outside of the normal parameters of a sale there. Because like we said at the beginning, you put something for sale, you put it at a certain price, the buyer pays a certain price, and that should be the end of it. And it is the end of it most of the time. But then there's these times when the buyer, either beforehand or after the sale, decided that they wanted to take advantage of you, the seller. So they can do that in a variety of different ways, but they all come back to a few different sort of overarching types. So I'm going to talk about that. So the first scam, and I see that my niece Katie is here. Hey, Katie. Glad you're here. Katie kind of fell victim to this scam. I'm sorry, Katie, but we've told this story before on the show. And this scam is kind of what I would call the high dollar item scam. So let's say you're a brand new seller, because usually that's who it happens to. It happens to brand new sellers that do not have a lot of experience on the platform, and they're selling a high dollar item. Now, what's a high dollar item? I would argue, you could argue about the floor of that, but I would say anything $100 and up, you could say is legitimately a high dollar item. But even if it's lower than that, if you're a new seller, you still could fall prey to this. So the way it works is that you sell a high dollar item, and then the buyer looks, because it's such a high dollar item, the buyer is going to find something wrong with the sale that isn't really wrong. In Katie's case, her buyer pulled a good, it was a good scam. I got to give the buyer credit. This was a tricky one. So the buyer, Katie, if I remember right, and she's not the only, this happened, Katie it was an auction, and it was for a high dollar item. It was like a $500 sale. And the buyer, you all may know, for an auction item, you don't have to pay right away. So Katie got a message saying, hey, the buyer has bought your item. And she was pretty new to the platform and thought at that moment that the buyer had in fact completed their payment, when in fact they had not. So Katie went ahead and started negotiating with the buyer and talking about, well, this is when I'm going to ship it and so on, and ship the item to the buyer. Well, lo and behold, the buyer did not receive the item, or at least said they didn't, and basically said, well, I'm not paying for something I didn't receive. Well, because the money never really transacted here, Katie was kind of in a tough spot, because it was not like it was ever in her account. I know that she contacted eBay, she contacted PayPal, she went round and round with them. But because the sale didn't actually happen and no money actually transacted, she was at a significant disadvantage. And the fact she was a new seller, eBay is going to look on you as a new seller as kind of dumb. I don't want to say dumb, but they're going to look at it as like, yeah, you don't know what you're doing. You're a brand new seller on our platform. And she was up the proverbial creek. She had to, this wouldn't have been quite so bad, except she was selling this item for someone else, which meant now that person was out of the money that she was going to give them once the sale went through. And lesson learned, try not to sell high dollar items, especially when you're new. And if you are getting paid for the item, make sure you are actually paid. The money is actually in your account before you ship the item. eBay has a nasty habit of telling you certain things have happened when they haven't really happened. Like, I will get an email on a return sometimes when someone starts a return that says, hey, the buyer's saying they shipped this item to you. Have you refunded them? And then you go into the return and look, and it shows still waiting for the buyer to ship the item. No tracking uploaded, anything. So they started the return, but they didn't actually send the return. So eBay has a habit of doing that sometimes with their notifications, because they want to clear out these transactions, whether it's a sale or a refund, a return, or what have you. So the high dollar item scam is definitely one you can get caught on. And it's not that hard to get caught up in that one, because you want to make the money, right? You're like, hey, I can sell this for $300. But I would advise you to kind of be very cautious about doing those higher items at the beginning. Number 2, feedback extortion. Now, this one's not quite as common maybe, but it's still out there. So you sell something to an item. This is how it works. Again, you might be a newer seller, but maybe not. And the buyer says something's wrong with the sale, wrong with the transaction, whatever. I got the item, it had a crack, whatever. Hey, take 30% off this item, Mr. Seller, or I'm going to give you negative feedback. Now, that is what's called feedback extortion, and it is absolutely against the rules of eBay. eBay does not allow buyers to hold sellers' feet to the fire in return for positive feedback. eBay expects you to do the right thing in the first place. They expect you to take good photos, to write good titles, to accurately describe condition and item specifics, to ship items when you say you're going to package them securely, and all those things. But a nefarious buyer can still sort of, find a crack in your armor, a chink in your armor, and threaten to give you negative feedback if you do not bow to their wishes. So that is another scam you can fall to. And I'm going to talk about some solutions to all these scams here at the end of this segment, guys. So stay tuned. Number 3, different address. So this scam works like a buyer, you sell an item to a buyer, and you're ready to ship it to them, and inevitably the email comes from them that says, hey, by the way, can you ship this to a different address? Now, this one's a little tricky because technically you can do that. You can go ahead and ship it to whatever address you want. And they might say, well, my real address is 123 Anywhere Street in this town. Instead of what's on my eBay account, I've just forgot to change it, whatever. And you can do it. You can ship it to them and you may be fine. However, here is where the scam can come in sometimes. The buyer will say, hey, ship it to this other address. You do. And then the buyer says they never received it. And by the rules of PayPal especially, because you didn't ship it to the address that's on the buyer's account, you technically broke the rules, but eBay will also tell you on their side of it, hey, you can do that. It's really confusing. Like, you can do it, but you don't have protection if you do it. So I would tell you this. If you're a brand new seller with no feedback, I would say just go ahead and tell the buyer, hey, I can't do that. I'm really sorry. If you want to cancel the sale, we can, but I can't ship it somewhere different. If you're a little bit more experienced and the item is not real high dollar value and you've got a lot of feedback under your belt, I would probably go ahead and ship it to a different address. I have done it a handful of times. Sometimes I've gone ahead and processed the item, and then the message came in that the buyer's like, hey, can you ship to this address instead? And I'm like, no, too late. Sorry, I've already processed this. The label's on. I bought the labels in the package. It's in the mail. Sorry. It's up to the buyers to keep their addresses correct, guys. It's not up to us. So when in doubt, ship it to the address on their that's listed, on the sale. Or the dreaded INAD. So for an INAD, that stands for item not as described. This is not always a scam. So basically what happens here is you sell an item and the buyer gets it and says there's something wrong with it that you didn't disclose. Now this is really tricky. I had one of these the other week where the buyer thought I listed an item as a certain size and the size was nowhere on the item, even though it was on the tag, and it was very clearly on the tag. And they opened up a case and they won the case, but then when I disputed it, eBay said, we see that there is a size on it. We're going to give you your money back, which they did. And they didn't give me any, they didn't give me a strike against my account on my seller account. Didn't affect my seller rating. But sometimes buyers will use this to get a discount on the item or free shipping back to you. That's a really popular, since I've moved to a lot of free shipping on a lot of my items, I have noticed an uptick in the number of buyers that have said, this item's not as described, and so I want to ship it back to you. But see, if I admit that it's not as described, I have to pay for their shipping label. And I already paid for their shipping label when it was free shipping on the front end. So I'm not exactly ecstatic about the idea of paying for another shipping label. By this point, now I'm down to like no profit in the item left hardly. So sometimes that will happen. But you need to describe your items really clearly in objective terms with lots of good quality photos, as many as you can reasonably fit in there that makes sense, using item specifics. And that's going to eliminate them because most of these INADs, guys, are buyer's remorse. They get the item and it didn't fit them. It was a different color than they thought. Like I had one the other day. I'll tell you a quick story on this one, then we go on to number 5. I sold a pair of drawstring shorts to a lady, and she went to return it and she put item not as described. And I was like, whoa. And she said, oh, well, I didn't realize these were button fly instead of a zipper fly. I thought they were zipper fly. And I'm like, all right, but that's not really item not as described. You just didn't ask the question, what type of fly is it? And now you don't, can you please cancel this return? Because, that's not really fair. It affects, or I'd have to pay for the shipping label. So she's like, okay, fine. So she canceled the return. Well, yesterday, as a matter of fact, I get a message saying that a case had been opened on that item, which originally it had been and had been closed, because I got the items back. And I got the shorts back. And I sent her a message and I said, hey, can you open a return again so I can refund your money? Transaction out there. I just got them in the mail. And so yesterday I get a message saying a case was opened by her as item not described and closed and found in her favor. And I'm like, whoa, eBay, cool your jets. So it was never a matter of me refunding her money, but I didn't want to get an item not as described strike on my account as not able to resolve the buyer. So I called them. I got pushed over to their appeals department. And I'll have to wait till Friday, believe it or not, to see if that item not as described strike comes on my account. And if it does, they'll remove it. They do a weekly evaluation on Thursday, which comes out on Fridays. I didn't know that, but that's what the person told me on the line. But really, the buyer was supposed to go in and just open a return, and they didn't, which is funny because there's where being an honest buyer or seller kind of hurt me. If I would have said nothing, shorts would just sit out there forever, I guess. But because she never even opened anything. It wasn't until I sent her the email. But eBay will take care of it. It was just still a little frustrating. So item not as described is a pretty common one. Number 5, and this one's just common sense. This is where a buyer asks you to do a transaction outside of eBay. They see something you have for sale. They send you a message that says, hey, can I just send you money through PayPal for that and not pay eBay's fees, basically, is what they're getting at. And you're not paying their fees either. If you do this, 2 things will happen. One, you will have no seller protection through eBay or through PayPal because you did not sell the item correctly through the platform. You went outside of the platform to do this. So now that buyer can even dispute this charge to PayPal, and you don't have a leg to stand on because you have no sale or anything. They can just say, oh, somebody hacked my account and sent you money. And the number 2 thing, which is the bigger problem, is do not, if you sell something outside of eBay and that was on sale on eBay, you are absolutely breaking the rules and regulations of eBay, and you could get suspended or banned from the platform. No item is really going to be worth that, guys. Don't do that. Don't sell items outside of eBay. Now, we got a lot of people in the chat, and maybe somebody knows the answer to this. I know there is some time that can pass where you can sell an item later if you end the auction or end the sale. Selling to somebody that contacted you through eBay, I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it. You run that risk of eBay saying, well, you just ended the item so that you could sell this and not pay fees. Because that is what you did. I mean, that is what you did. That's what happened. They're not wrong about that, and they're liable to suspend you or ban your, or kick you off the platform. So don't do transactions outside of eBay that started on eBay. It's not a good idea in any way, shape, or form. You have no protection, and you run the risk of losing your account. So I'm going to give you now, I guess, some general tips. And then we got a lot of questions and people, or a lot of people commenting in the chat. So we'll talk about some of the ones that people have brought up. But I'm going to give you some general tips here on how to prevent that will prevent 99.9% of this 0.1% of your transactions that are scammers. And I think it could be that low. It's pretty low. So here are some general tips. General tip number 1, always communicate through eBay messaging. Even if somebody sends you an email to your personal email, go back, find that buyer on eBay and send your messages through their system. Because here's why. If you have a conflict with that item and you've got to call eBay and you've got an eBay representative on the phone, they can very quickly look at all the messages sent between you and that buyer and see the timeline and sequence of events and what's happened. If you have to start pulling in your personal email address and the buyer's personal email address and all the email logs there, much more complicated, and they may or may not find in your favor because of that. Because they don't want you communicating with buyers outside of eBay because they're running an e-commerce platform, and this is the way they want to run it. So that protects you as a seller. Now given that I'm saying you communicate through eBay messaging, you got to be professional. I mean, you can't blast the buyer and say, well, you're just an idiot for thinking that, sir or ma'am. And how could you be so stupid? You can't do that either. Like, that is hurting your case. And we'll talk about what you should say and shouldn't say here in a moment. But always use eBay's messaging. It's just simpler that way. Even if a buyer says to me, hey, if they send me an email and they say, hey, and I say, hey, can you send me this message in eBay? You know, no big deal. Just say, I would be glad to answer you over through eBay's messaging. That's what they're supposed to do as buyers. So always use eBay's messaging system. That will help. Number 2 tip, create quality listings with great photos, conditions, and item specifics. Now, that's a good set of tips just to sell your items, but it's also a good set to keep you from having these issues, because when you don't put on something that it's a small and they get it and you put, hey, unisex shirt, and they get it and they say, well, I thought it was going to be a medium. Who's right there? Like, you didn't put a size, you didn't put any measurements, nothing. So you've kind of created the situation you're trying to avoid. Now, I know you can't put every little detail about every little part of that item, but you got to be reasonable here. Like, if you're selling clothing, size is kind of an important one. Color, you could probably leave to the photos in a lot of cases because that's a little bit subjective sometimes. But size, the manufacturer, things like that that are not in dispute, those you can absolutely put in your listing and save yourself a bunch of headaches. You can put them in your title, which that helps you get searched better anyway. And of course, the item specifics. So always think about creating quality listings with great photos and item specifics, and the condition too. Is it new or is it pre-owned? And that's a tricky one, guys, because I've seen people put things as new, and then down in the description, they'll put like new, only worn twice. It's not new. I hate to tell you that. If it's been worn, it's not new. If it's been washed, it's not new. So you never want to lie about those things. You're better off putting it in a worse condition, and then the person's pleasantly surprised at how great a condition it is, rather than the other way around when you try to say that it's in a better condition or a different type of condition than it really is. So always be truthful with that. Third tip, assume positive intent from buyers. As we said at the beginning of this, most of your buyers are not scammers. They're not. Just like most people are not scammers. They're not. However, I'm going to say this to you. This is where a lot of resellers go wrong. And it goes back to the communication piece. If the buyer starts asking you questions about the sale or has a problem with the sale, okay, and you come across in that message, whether on purpose or by accident, with a confrontational tone, you are going to turn a good buyer a lot of times with a legitimate problem into a hostile buyer. And now they are going to be looking to get any advantage they can over you. They're going to be looking for any loophole. They're going to be looking for any way they can to get their money back or to get an advantage in this situation, which will let them get what they want. But you played a role in that by being so confrontational with them. You know, most people when you're confrontational with them, they either shrink away completely and do nothing, or they come right back at you with a confrontational tone. So there's no reason to be that way. You can be empathetic to their situation. You can be apologetic where necessary, and you can be really willing to try to work it out. And most of the time you can. I mean, there's always going to be an exception or two, but don't turn a good buyer into a bad buyer, into one that might seek to pull one over on you with your tone. That's a mistake. Okay, the next tip is you should call eBay when you're in doubt. Like, I make this mistake still sometimes. I call them after the fact sometimes, and I'm like, I always ask eBay when I'm on the phone with them, should I have called you guys about this and at what point? And they'll tell you usually. And they don't mind you calling them. They really don't. You know, so call eBay when you're in doubt about a situation, about what a buyer's asking you to do or asking for. And when you talk to eBay, use facts and stay non-emotional. This is business. It's not a personal attack on you. Okay. The buyer, if you come across to eBay, you know, the other week I had that situation where they said, well, their feedback is their feedback. And even though you were right about this, it's their opinion and we have to leave it. And it was a negative feedback, right? I got a negative feedback, which I haven't had in a long time. But I was super nice to the lady on the phone. I told her, you know what? I totally understand. I wish you guys could remove it, but if you can't, you can't. And I appreciate, you know, the help you gave me on, you know, maintaining my seller rating. Lo and behold, a couple hours later, the feedback was removed. Did somebody break a policy and help me out? I don't know. But all I know is I didn't get mad. I didn't yell. I didn't blame anybody. I didn't point fingers. I just said, you know what? I wish you guys could take this feedback off because I don't feel like it's fair. It's more a remark on me instead of the transaction, which doesn't make sense. But at the same time, I also realized that if I would have gotten really mad with them, you know, they would have just shut me out and said, well, we're not going to help that guy. So maybe they helped me. Maybe they, you know, maybe they did something they weren't supposed to do and took that feedback off. Either way, I was grateful for it. It was gone within a couple hours. So, you know, always kind of keep that non-emotional, you know, positive business tone. And the last tip here is follow eBay's policies to a T. Guys, this is the best protection you have. If you don't follow eBay's policies, whatever they are in a given situation, and you can call and ask, or you can look them up, you don't have a leg to stand on. And eBay is not going to support you. I see so many people in the reseller groups and so on that say, well, this happened and this happened and this buyer, blah, 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 and blah, blah. And then you come to find out at some point in this big, long conversation that the seller did something that was not in line with eBay's policies. And guess what? eBay said, tough, you're out of luck. You're going to have to eat that negative. You're going to have to eat that return. That's just going to be the way it is. So, and I'm not trying to say that eBay is always correct, because they're not. They make mistakes just like we do. But if you don't follow their policies, how can they really support you? Like, they can't really, you know, if you're out there selling and doing things that are incorrect or wrong to your buyers, they have no recourse but to fine for the buyers. And I got to tell you guys, like, the whole approach to this is that buyers are not our adversaries. Despite we have these conflicts with them, you're going to have conflicts when you're business, right? That's just with customers. You're going to. But they're not your adversaries. They are your reason for being in business. Without them, you're not. You're not selling anything. So you got to find ways to get along with them. That doesn't mean you give in every case, on every situation. I'm not suggesting that. But if you follow the rules, if you maintain good open communication with your buyers and with eBay, if you try to do the right thing when you list your items, when you sell your items, when you ship your items, you pack your items, most of these scam type situations are never even going to come up. And if they do come up, you're going to be in the right, and you're going to be able to take care of it. You're going to have a leg to stand on. You're going to be able to say to eBay, hey, this is what happened. It sounds like it's this. Can you guys help me out? And most of the time they're going to. They're going to say, well, you did the right thing. The buyer was wrong in this case, and we're going to take care of this for you. It's done it it's happened to me many times. Only when they said they were going to keep that feedback on recently did I think I kind of lost that a little bit. I kind of didn't get what I wanted. And then they removed it anyway. So I still got it. So, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just saying you have to approach this with this mentality that buyers are not your adversary. They do sometimes want things or do things that are incorrect. And then you fall back on eBay's policies and so on, which hopefully you've been following and communicating. You try to work things out with buyers first, but if you can't, then you do call eBay. You talk to them. And that's going to resolve most of these. And the best way to prevent a scam on eBay is to prevent it on the front end, to not have to deal with it, to not do things that are outside of eBay's policies, to make sure that you're making good listings with good photos and descriptions and specifics and so on. Only communicate through the messaging system, and not being confrontational with your buyers. If you do all those things, most of these scam type situations, which are few and far between anyway, are going to go away. You're not going to have to deal with them. And the ones that do come up, you'll be well prepared. You'll be well armed. So anyway, I hope, guys, that was helpful. Just kind of my thoughts on this. I don't normally talk about negative subjects, but I don't think talking about scams is a negative subject. It's real. I know there's people out there who, they get very emotional about this, which I would recommend you don't do. There's not really a reason to get emotional about this unless you're letting it become personal for you. So that's a good tip too. Don't take this personal, because it really isn't personal. Even when a buyer is trying to scam you, quote unquote, they don't know you. They just know themselves. And they're acting out of self-interest a lot of times, and they're not trying, and even if, they're trying to get something over on a seller, but it's not because it's you. It's just because you happen to be the person that sold it to them. That's all. It's not because they're like, well, you're a terrible person, so I'm going to try to get something over on you. It's just because they're going to try to do that anyway. So there's no reason to let it get very personal, because it really isn't. That's just how they're wired, and you just have to deal with them in some of the ways that we laid out here. So, that was a lot of talking. I realize without Kaaren here, I have to talk a lot. But if you guys have questions and comments, just leave them in the chat. Like I said, this is a live chat going on right now. We have almost 60 people watching, which thank you guys for that coming out today. Really appreciate that. And if you have situations where maybe you have dealt with a scammer, maybe successfully, maybe not successfully, maybe you've dealt with eBay successfully or not successfully, leave them in the chat or leave them down in the comments below after this video post. It'd be cool to hear some of them. This can be a little bit of venting, and that's fine. That's a good thing to have. Lizzie Lou said, I got my first INAD for odor on clothing item. There was none I could discern. Calling eBay today. Any advice on an odor INAD? I would say odor's a tricky one, because that sometimes can be subjective. I don't know if anybody else has had that one either. I haven't ever had that actual one before, so that is a little tricky. But I would offer just to take a return, or maybe even refund the person's money and let them keep it if it's a low dollar item. If you're not going to try to sell it again, if it doesn't have an odor, you could sell it again. But now you're going to have them ship it back to you, which is going to be a pain potentially. And they may or may not have to pay for the shipping if they do an INAD and eBay agrees with them. If you aren't going to sell it again, you might be better off just to refund them and move on, because how much time and energy you're going to spend on this? And you're not going to resell the item anyway, because maybe there's no profit in it now, especially if you have to pay for them to ship it back to you. I don't know what the item is or how much it was, but I would just try to get that one gone as quick as possible, because man, that's a tricky one. Yeah, and Michelle said, offer a full refund. There's nothing about a partial refund that makes it smell better. Well, maybe they can wash it. I don't know. Maybe they can't. I don't know. We don't know what the item is. But perhaps they can wash it and get the smell out if there is a smell in it. So, odor, that's kind of like color. Like, this doesn't look like the color in your photos. That could be, and that's why you try to take several photos and you try to make sure at least the photos all look the same, even if the color is not quote unquote being accurately portrayed. But try to make the color look the same. And if you're selling an item like jeans, for example, most of the time, most jeans are blue. And most people know that. There's some shade of blue. Maybe they're very, very light, washed out. Maybe they're very dark. They're somewhere between. So most people are going to know that jeans are blue. As long as you don't send them a pair of jeans that you say are blue and they show up and they're red, you're probably okay. But I have had people say, well, I thought these were blue from the picture and they were black. And the picture looked black. But to their eye, they thought it was blue. So, whatever, take a return, move on. It just doesn't make sense to spend too much time on a lot of these. So sorry, Kaaren was texting me something. She's distracting me while she's not here. She's still part of the show. But yeah, so what other issues you guys had? I probably missed a few when I was scrolling down. Let's see here. I'm going to scroll back up and look at some of these. I saw a listing from a very big shoe seller, and their new shoe had more wear than my used pair. Yeah, that's interesting to me. Like, shoes are usually something you can pretty much tell if they're new or not. I mean, if shoes get wear, it's going to show. But I know there are situations where people sell like the model, is that the right word? The demo, the one in the shoe store, that they have on display that can get a little more wear. That's kind of tricky. I'm not really sure there in that case. Do you still consider that new? No one's actually bought it and worn outside. The shoe store will still consider it new. That's for sure. But I don't know if I would consider, that's kind of hard. There might be a category for that, like ones that were displays and so on. Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of refunds, guys, doing longer refund policy time sometimes helps with prevent returns as well. Because when you give people 60 days, sometimes they're not as on the ball. Most people, if they're going to return, they're going to return pretty quickly after they start the return. I know eBay sends them messages, but I've had several returns this year. They got started and never got completed. It seems like it's a higher number than when I was doing 30-day returns. I could be wrong, but, and again, it's just my small sample, so take it for what it's worth. But I think that even going with the higher return time can help you cut down some of your returns, because people think they have a lot longer, so it's not a priority for them. So, consider 60 days on it. Katie said, we sold a Halloween costume, brand new. A lady's trying to return his INAB because she needs an adult size. The photo is of a kid. Description says for kids. You'll win that one, Katie. You'll absolutely win that one. I mean, that's if you described it as a kid's, description says it's kids, and they say, hey, we need adult size. They can open a case, and you may have to call eBay after they open the INAD, but they'll lose that one for sure. If what you're saying is all correct here, as long as you put it with kids. Now, the only way you might not ever win that one is if you put the category as adult. And that's an easy mistake to miss if you're selling. I've almost missed it a couple times on jeans before, where I've been selling adult size jeans. And we really don't sell kids. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, we'll pick up a kid's. It's usually by mistake. It'll be like a larger kid size. So it'll look like maybe it's a smaller men's or women's size. And it's happened a couple times to us just because we're dumb. At least this half of the equation, not the other half. And then, we'll realize it, and I'll go to list it, and I'll realize, oh, my presets, my templates are adults. Got to change that to kids, because that would be very confusing to the person. They're like, and most people will ask, but, if you put it's a size 20 and it's a kid size 20 and a woman thinks it's a size 20 in women's, that is quite a difference in size. So, you're going to absolutely get an item not as described there because you didn't describe it correctly. If you put, it's a women's jean, but I'm selling in the kids, or vice versa. So Christopia says no change since she went to 60 days with longer return time. People procrastinate. I tend to agree. I just think it's how we're wired. Adams had a return setting for 3 weeks now. He approved it and the buyer hasn't sent it back. Tempted to ask eBay to close it, especially since I provided free priority shipping. You know, and I think we have, someone correct me if I'm wrong. I usually just let them roll off on their own. So I'm really giving them a lot of time to return it. But I think you can return it within 5 days after, excuse me, not return it. I think you can close the return after 5 days if the person requests a return and doesn't send it back. I think it's 5 days. Somebody correct me on that. I may be incorrect, but so technically you can close it pretty quickly. I just let it set until it automatically closes out by eBay. So that way they get like, I feel like they get, you know, the 60 days plus. So they get like 3 months. You know, so people are saying, yeah, it's 5 days and the 6th day you can ask. Yeah, so, you know, that's a quick little tip for you. If you want to close out those returns, you can. I have mixed emotions about that. It's not the best customer service, quite honestly. But on the other hand, you are following the policy. You're not doing anything wrong if you do it. It's just it's like you're winning on a technicality, you know, kinda. But go ahead and do it. You know, if you want to run your business that way, just do it that way. Be consistent with it and do it. You're not doing anything wrong. eBay's not going to fault you. Just be prepared for some nasty buyer messages potentially. So could happen. And you may even have to block a buyer or two, which I've had to do for various reasons. But what happens to postage that you pay for the item to be returned if the item isn't returned? So if it was like an item not described and you went ahead and paid for the label, or you just gave them free shipping back or whatever, you should get that returned to you. Theoretically, that should come back through eBay's system, but it depends. Yeah, Christopia, I think WV Thrifter is saying if you had like free shipping, free return shipping, or maybe it was an item not as described, so you had to pay for it, but then they never sent it. You should get that back when the return closes. Now, you know, the way I always check that, if you really want to check it in PayPal, because that is technically where you should see it. Because eBay, because they do so many credits and debits over the course of a month, especially if you're selling a lot, you can miss it and not see it. But in PayPal, you should be able to see very specifically that transaction come back out. You know, it's kind of a little bit of minutia, but, you know, if you're staying on top of it, you definitely want to look and check that out. eBay gives the customers clear instruction for returns. Michelle, I don't disagree with you, but I cannot tell you guys how many people I have that when I tell them they can return an item, which, by the way, I don't even know why they're asking because it's very clearly on the listing, because they'll ask, can I return it? It's like, it's on the listing. Still there. Wasn't kidding about that part. But then once you tell them that, they're like, okay, well, how do I do that? And sometimes they'll be eBay buyers with like 200, 300, 400, 500 feedback. It's not like they're brand new. So I don't know why. I don't think it's complicated, but I don't know why people can't seem to figure it out in a lot of cases. But that has been my experience, is that people don't totally understand the return process sometimes on eBay. And maybe it's just, you know, certain people are always not going to understand something no matter how clear you make it, right? That's just reality. But, you know, I do think maybe eBay doesn't always do the best job of that, just because I do get so many questions about it. And it just baffles me. Like, I don't really understand. Like, if I wanted to return something that I bought off of eBay or Amazon, and maybe it's because I resell, but I would very quickly just go back to my account, find that item, and see if there's a return option. But a lot of people, when you tell them that, it's like they've discovered a new continent or something, you know, like they're Columbus or something. I don't know. You know, they act like they've never heard that before. It's just this wondrous thing that's new, and I don't know. It's odd. People don't totally know how to read. Probably true. And, you know, sometimes not even they don't know how, they just don't have desire to do it. Let's see. Mark says, always make sure to tell them to buy postage through eBay. Too many buyers go to the post office to pay high retail rates. You know what, Mark? That's genius in another way. It's genius because, one, you're looking out for the buyer, which is always a good practice as a seller, I think. But it's genius in another way that if they say, hey, I want to return this, can I return it? You say, yes, buy the postage through eBay because it'll be cheaper. You're already kind of training them not to think about the item not as described route, and you're already presupposing that they're, in their minds, that they're going to have to pay for postage to send it back to you. So that just becomes what they do. Instead of thinking, wait, can I get this for free back to this person? Because I think that's one of the downfalls of free shipping, that when people buy something from you and you have free shipping on it, like I do a lot of my, I think they believe that if they ship it back to you, it should be free. I don't know why they think that, but I really believe that is in some people's mindset as far as free shipping goes. So anyway, where did you get your shoe rack? You mean that shoe rack? That is in the description under my Amazon associate links, Mama J. They are song mix racks, so check that out. They're great. So many, I can't tell you how many people have bought those things, not just through my links, but some other resellers too, and people have been using these racks. They're great little racks. They're only like 35 bucks shipped, and they hold about 50 pair each. Technically, 50 is a stretch. If your pair are bigger, you might only get 40, 45, but they're great. No tools to assemble. You can put them together in like 10 minutes, and they're very lightweight. You can move them around very easily when they don't have shoes on them, and check them out. I love them. And Kaaren and I just found them on Amazon one day and just read the reviews, but there's a link in the description of this video to all the equipment and gear we use. So it's an affiliate link, but it doesn't cost you any extra, and it really helps out the channel if you get it. So I do appreciate it. But in any case, get them off of Amazon. Probably buy them on eBay too, actually. I don't know. Never look for them on there. Let's see what other questions there are. I had a customer open a return and accepted, and they accidentally closed case instead of printing label. I told her to call eBay and never heard anything else. Yeah, large. That's interesting. Yeah, I think once, yeah, I don't know. And maybe that's what happened to my buyer this weekend when they closed the initial INAD return that I mentioned for the shorts. And then they tried to open a new return. It wouldn't let them. So they had to open it as an INAD to let it. Because I told them, I was like, hey, can you open a return again? You know what's interesting is if I would have just given them the money back, through PayPal, they probably wouldn't have opened a case, and I wouldn't have had to spend, 15 minutes on the phone with eBay. But I don't know. But then I'm technically not doing it the right way. I even asked the rep on the phone for eBay, what should I have done in this case? And they're like, well, you can always call us and ask because every case is different. And I kind of took their answer like, we don't really know either. In this case, what you should have done. I was like, all right, fair enough. I'll just call you next time before I even say anything. They don't have a scale, so let them know it's 14 ounces or whatever. Yeah, the item. Yeah, I've noticed that too, Mark. And people, somebody the other day sent me a return back. Maybe you guys know, does anybody use UPS in the chat to ship things? I got a return back. They took the original package, which is a padded flat rate, and put it in a UPS mailer and sent it back to me. That had to be expensive. Like, I don't know. I would have thought that'd be more expensive than USPS, but maybe I'm wrong. But it came back UPS, and I'm thinking, man, people just don't even care. They're like 10, 12 bucks. Whatever. Let's see. You can't open a second return for the same item. That's probably why they open a case. Yeah, you're probably right, Seam. But it would have been nice for the customer to message me. And I take some responsibility there too. I could have said to them, because I got the shorts back and they hadn't corresponded with me. I sent the message and said, hey, can you open a return? And they probably remember doing it as an INAD the first time, and that's why they did it that way the second time, because it may not have let them do the other return. The whole thing. I mean, I should have communicated, going back to Mark's point, I should have communicated, and this is a good tip for you guys. I should have communicated exactly what the buyer should do. And I wanted the buyer to get the item back to me. It was clearly not my fault that they didn't know that they were button fly instead of a zipper fly. But I should have communicated to the buyer, hey, here's what you need to do. Here's how you need to ship them. Here's the cheapest way. Here's what you need to do on eBay. And that way there's no miscommunication. And then let them know if they have any issue doing that, contact me first before they do anything else. And we'll go from there. And you could even say, hey, if you have any issue, contact me and I will contact eBay to see what to do on my side of it to make sure we get this taken care of as quick as possible. Like, make it like you're helping them out, because you are, because they don't know. This particular buyer only had maybe 40 feedbacks. They hadn't bought a whole lot, and they've been on the platform for a while. They just haven't bought a whole lot. But I don't know. It's one of those things where you probably should just walk your buyer through it, let them know if they have issues to contact you first before they do anything else. Instead, this buyer probably, as you said, went to go do a return, couldn't do a second one on it, but could do an item not subscribed. So they opened that and eBay closed it for them like that. Like, eBay didn't even ask me or anything. And I asked them, I said, is this your policy? Like, if someone opens an item not subscribed case, do you even ask the seller? And they couldn't really give me an answer. So I think the answer is no, they don't. In some cases, they just say, give them their money back. And then they're going to give me a strike on it, which I still may get. I'll have to check on Friday to see if I do or not. But, guys, the whole subject is one of these things where it's just like you have to protect your business and your account. I think you can still have positive intent towards people and believe that they're not all out to get you, because they're really not. Most of these, your buyers don't know you. Like, they don't have anything against you. And very few are the number of buyers who really buy something with the intention to scam you right from the very beginning. That is a very tiny number, and they're only looking for very specific items and cases where that makes sense, like with buyers who don't have a lot of feedback or a lot of experience, and it's usually high dollar items, and they're going to, right off the bat, these people are going to try to do something, ask you to do something you shouldn't do. And that's how you're going to know that's when the red flag should go up, when they ask you to do something that you don't normally do. And they know that. They know that because that is the person who's trying to scam you. But that is not going to be a lot of people you run into on eBay. Even if you do thousands and thousands of transactions, it's still going to be a very tiny fraction of a percentage point that you're going to have to deal with. And you're going to feel like you got to devote a lot of time and energy to them, but you don't. Just contact eBay, handle it, use all the tips we talked about earlier, and you should be fine. Your eBay is not out to get you either, guys. I hate to tell you that. I don't hate to tell you. Actually, I want to tell you, eBay is not out to screw you over as a seller, despite what you might believe. They're not trying to screw you over with promoted listings or fees or negative feedback or anything like that. They know they need sellers and they need buyers, but they need good sellers and they need good buyers. They don't need crappy ones. So that's how they're running their business. And sometimes it's going to seem like it's coming at you at a personal level or even on a business level, but it's not. It's really not. So you have to start up here. A lot of this dealing with scammers starts in your head. And then that leads to the action, that you take after these situations come up. So I hope that was helpful, guys. We will be back on Wednesday with another show. Kaaren should be back to join me. So if you guys run any eBay scams out there, leave them in the comments down below. We'll see, we'll see what happens from this. What could go wrong from asking for that? But take care. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I'll see you guys really soon. And this is Prof Sales saying good sales to you.